Hey everyone, my name is Nick and welcome to The Sober Method. So this channel is dedicated to learning about all things that have to do with recovery, mental health, well-being in general. So we're going to explore all kinds of different topics and coping skills and strategies, learning about all the different things that help people stay sober and cope with the challenges of life. So a little about me, I am a recovering addict/alcoholic. I grew up with addiction at home, and then when I was old enough, around 15, 16, I started my own journey with addiction. After some years and attempts at getting sober via rehab, detoxes, I was eventually able to put together enough time so that I could go back to school, in which I went to study addiction. So now I'm working in the field for the last 2 years as a milieu counselor in a detox facility. I have 7 years clean off of opiates, 4 years off alcohol, stimulants, etc. So basically my whole life has revolved around addiction in some way, shape, or form. And all that just to say that I can relate. I know that we don't really want to hear this stuff from somebody that doesn't have personal experience with it, even if they have all the book knowledge in the world, which I do not. I do have a lot of experience, and I want to sort of offer myself as a guinea pig of sorts. I am in recovery, like I said. I do have experience with trauma, and I have fallen off of pretty much all of my self-care and not utilizing coping skills. And amazingly, my mental health has been declining. So I think, short of relapse, this is a great place to start to prove that these things can work and bring you up. So essentially, not working your coping skills, not doing the things that help you, this is what we refer to in the recovery world as white knuckling it. And while you may stay sober, it's just not a very happy way to live. Also, just got married, and my wife is now pregnant, and we essentially have 9 months, or I have 9 months, I should say, to try to get as mentally healthy as possible. So doing that is going to be part of the goal here, and I'm going to be demonstrating, educating about all these different coping skills that are going to help get there. My intention really is to provide some experience and hope for people by showing the effect that these techniques and coping skills have. Like I said, I'll be charting progress along the way so we can really see the effects of these. All right, so first thing, coping skills. I'm going to give a little visual about how coping skills help us. So coping skills are essentially the things that help us cope. And they are that. They are skills. They are things that as you practice, you can get better at. The more you practice them, the more they work. When we try to use coping skills only when we're in crisis, it's not going to be very effective. And then we're going to get this attitude of coping skills don't work for me. Okay? So I like this visual. This is the bridge of recovery. That's us. And if we only have one board in our bridge of recovery, going across the waters of despair or addiction, whatever you want to call it, this board is typically called willpower. This is where we think that if we have enough willpower, just wanting it will be enough. And I promise you, if wanting it was enough, everybody would be happy and sober. But it's not. So the first wind that comes along, whether it be in the form of stress, grief, some major life event that stresses us or causes us distress, it's going to blow us off pretty easily. So what we need to do is put other boards in place Now, these boards are our coping skills. So that might look like meditation. There's a lot of good research on meditation. We're going to go over that later. It could look like a sponsor. A sponsor is somebody who helps keep us accountable, as well as guide us through the 12 steps, which we'll also talk about. All right, so there's some other ones here. Exercise, a very, very, very powerful coping skill. Breathing techniques. I'm just going to put breathing. Let's see, another one, connection in general. So that could be support from our friends, our family. They say connection is the opposite of addiction, and I'm going to explain why that is, maybe in this video, maybe in a later one. Now, there's many, many more. Spirituality. That is a good one as well. So there's many, many more coping skills that we can rely on and use, but all of them are contingent on this right here being traded for a different word. Instead of willpower, we can put willingness. So if we're not willing, whether we are, I don't know, either too lazy or we just are too uncomfortable with new things, if we're not open to trying any of this stuff, then we're really going to limit our abilities to cope. We're really going to limit the amount of tools that are in our toolbox. And as you can see, the more coping skills that we can put up here, the wider our bridge gets. So the wider our bridge gets, the harder it is for us to be knocked off. Now, like I said, these boards get put in place through consistent action, through making them into habits. We don't get to just start throwing boards down when the storm comes. I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's really sometimes too little too late. One thing working in the rehab that I've been working in for the last 2 years, I hear all kinds of reasons why a person has relapsed and has come back into the treatment facility. But one thing I have never heard as why somebody has relapsed, I've never heard someone say, Nick, I don't know what happened. I was exercising, I was talking to my sponsor every day, I was going to meetings, I was practicing my breathing techniques, I was praying, I was reaching out when I needed help, and then next thing I know, there's a drink in my hand. Never once have I ever heard that. More often than not, it is I gradually stopped meditating, I gradually stopped exercising, I gradually just fell off from going to meetings, and then next thing you know, there was a drink or a drug in my hand. So that's more often what I really hear. Never heard the other. And that's another important thing to really understand too when it comes to relapse. So this is what recovery looks like. And I get people that come through the treatment facility 1, 2, 3, 4 times, sometimes more than that. And that's perfectly fine. That's some people's journey looks like that. We hardly ever do anything perfect the first time we try it. This is kind of what it looks like. We hit rock bottom. We realize we need help. We need some kind of assistance. We can't do it on our own. So we go to treatment or whatever it is we do, and we start getting some sober time. And then what happens? Well, a lot of times people think that they can moderate. Everybody that's ever been an addict or alcoholic has tried to moderate it, first to keep it from getting out of control. And this can be where a lot of people get stuck because they bargain with it. They say, well, maybe I'll just drink on the weekends, or maybe I'll only use this percentage of my check to buy drugs with. And this is just other ways we try to bargain with our addiction. So we learn that is not possible. Then we try again. But then maybe we say, you know what? I got a problem with drinking. I don't have a problem with cocaine. So I'll just do coke, or I'll just do marijuana. And then so often that leads us right back to the drug that we were trying, or drink that we were trying to avoid. So we realize that doesn't work. Then we get back on the wagon. We're not moderating. We're not substituting. And then, like I was saying here, this big word, complacency. We then maybe get it, maybe 4 or 5 years. I like to say that there's 2 really dangerous times with relapse. One is early on, when you're still experiencing maybe withdrawals, a lot of cravings, a lot of triggers, and this is a very difficult time. But there's another dangerous time in recovery, and that's 5, 10, 15 years down the road, where we start to think that we're okay now, that we got it, that we don't have to continue to do these things that got us all that time in the first place. Sometimes people even think that, well, that was a long time ago. I was a different person back then. I didn't know what I know now. I've come a long way. I'm strong enough to be able to do it now. And where we find out we're not. So this may be another lesson we need to learn. Another lesson we might learn is, say we might think we can date somebody or be with somebody that is in active addiction. Maybe we will think that, I have all this time under my belt. I can help them get sober, right? But another thing I've heard is that they are going to get you drunk or high before you ever get them sober. We can absolutely support a person and try to be there for them, but when it comes to being heavily involved, like a romantic relationship with somebody that's in active addiction, this is really putting us in a dangerous place. Okay? So sometimes people have to learn that lesson. And there's many, many other lessons that people go through, so that they eventually, once they finally get enough lessons together, eventually then their recovery starts to look like a more consistent angle upwards. The trajectory stays in a positive direction more consistently. So, we don't have to beat ourselves up for relapsing, for being back in treatment for a 3rd, 4th, 5th time, whatever. As long as we're learning, as long as we're not repeating the same mistakes over and over again, we're getting better. You are progressing. If you look here, say this is 2024, and this is back in 2010, right? This person, when they've relapsed here for the 3rd, 4th time, they can very easily feel that I've gotten nowhere, that I am continuing to be bested by this drug or this drink or my neurosis or whatever it is. But if you take a step back, look at how much further they've come, how much higher they are on this graph than they were in 2010. All the lessons they've learned and how close they are to finally having it click, right? The click seems to happen when people become, I'd say, part of the no matter what club. For me, that was part of it for me, was that I said, you know what, I will, and this is very dramatic, I don't feel this way anymore, but this helped me for a while. I said, I will put a gun in my mouth before I relapse. That was how firm I felt, how stubborn I felt about my recovery. And it takes that. It's another type of thing called burning your lifeboats. So you say you burn the lifeboats, you burn the boats in order to take over the island. And what that means is you don't give yourself a way out. Because if you give yourself a plan B, or a reservation, we call it in recovery, if you give yourself a plan B, then your brain, whenever things start getting hard, start getting challenging, your brain is going to go right there every single time. And now you're going to have two struggles. You're going to have the struggle that you're going through, and then you're going to have the struggle of trying to fight the craving, trying to fight the urge to go back to your original coping skill. Because that's what drugs and alcohol are. They, for a lot of people in addiction and recovery, they are a coping skill. And they are a very powerful coping skill. They work. If they didn't work, nobody would do it. Are they healthy? No. Are they sustainable? No. But they do work. But we don't recommend it. So, if you burn the lifeboats, you don't give yourself that option, you make that firm decision, resolving any ambivalence, this can help us. This will tell the brain that it's going to have to find another way. And then we might start looking at these types of things. We might discover new types of things that we can put here in place so that we don't fall off. All right, so another thing that I want to say about coping skills is we spend so much of our time when we're in active addiction either trying to find our substance, using our substance, being under the effects of it, and recovering from the effects of the substance, that when we get sober, there is a huge gap in our schedule. So we always need to we have to fill that gap with something. And it's really helpful, of course, to use this gap to start implementing our coping skills. Working with a sponsor, reaching out to support groups, going to meetings, meditation, exercise, therapy, all these things take time, our favorite hobbies, and this is a perfect replacement for our drugs and alcohol. But talking about replacing it with something, if coping skills are replacing our drugs or our alcohol as what we've been using to numb or suppress or run away from, distract ourselves from our feelings, then that's not good. That's essentially the same exact pattern that we had with drugs and alcohol. So they're not meant to be another means of avoidance the way our substance was. You can see this particularly with grief, where it can a person can get a little bit confused or misled by what's going on underneath, and they think that they have a whole entire different issue when really it's just the symptom of a deeper issue. Like for grief, if they were using because they lost somebody, you lost somebody that you loved, and so you use drugs and alcohol to repress or numb those feelings. Then you get sober, and now you've learned all these good coping skills and distress tolerance techniques that you use once again when things get hard, and never actually address that grief. We're still keeping it at a distance. Just instead of with drugs and alcohol, now we're keeping it at a distance with our coping skills. So then when grief is repressed, oftentimes it manifests as anxiety. And so then a person thinks that they have an anxiety disorder, and they go to a doctor, and the doctor says, yes, this looks like an anxiety disorder. let's give you some anti-anxiety medications. And now these become another means to suppress and repress and distract from our inner world and what's really going on underneath. And then this doesn't do anything to heal the issue. Time doesn't always heal because people can get stuck in the grief process. And so while our coping skills won't necessarily make you happier, they will help you to get unstuck if we use them in the right way. They're meant to be like an oven mitt that we put on so we can handle the actual issue, handle the hot pot on the stove. Like I said, that's probably not going to make us happier in the short term, but in the long term it will. So yes, drugs and alcohol, they are a terrible coping skill. And coping skills, healthy coping skills like breathing techniques, exercise, meditation, all these good things, they are useful and they are healthier. But if they're used in the wrong way, then we're not going to get better. We're still going to be in that same cycle. I mean, we'll get better in some ways, but in other ways, we're going to stay stuck. It's like when the right means are used in the wrong way, we get poor results. And then the other part, just what we mentioned earlier, if our life looks the same after getting sober as it did when we were in active addiction, just minus drugs and alcohol, then that's not good. We have to fill that gap in our schedule with something, hopefully something positive. We need to replace it with something healthy, and not take it to extremes either, because that's something that us as addicts can often do because we're extreme people. But yes, those are two main points. So one last thing on coping skills before we wrap it all up. Coping skills, like I said, are not meant to be a means of avoidance, and they are not meant to get rid of all of our negative emotions and negative feelings. They're meant to help us respond to those things in better ways. They, if we practice them enough, become habits. And it's kind of like a boxer. A boxer doesn't have to think to dodge a punch when it comes in, or block or parry. He automatically does it because he's trained it, he's practiced it. The same thing can happen when we practice our coping skills enough to where when these negative emotions come or these stressful events come, we automatically jump right into our coping skills. We automatically lean harder on them when in proportion to the amount of stress in our lives. This is when they really save us, when they have been ingrained like that, and then when events happen or distressing emotions come, we can automatically lean towards something more positive as a response and less negative, so that we can handle and process those events and those feelings. So just one last bit there. Felt like it was important to mention that, and we're going to wrap this up on coping skills and move on to something else. I'm not sure what yet, but we're going to probably move maybe into EMDR, since that's pretty relevant for me right now. But we're going to move forward, and I just hope that everyone keeps on staying with us on the journey.